Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, interviewing Charles Shroyer at the LaFountain Bank, LaFountain, Indiana, Wednesday, April 11th, 1973. Starting with the first thing I'm going to ask you this afternoon is where and when you were born.
I was born June 19th, 1910, on East Hill Street in Wabash, Indiana.
And your parents and your mother's maiden name also?
My father was Charles L. Shroyer, and my mother was Lucy Sypolt Shroyer.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
No, my mother died when I was born, and my father remarried Eva Baumbauer approximately a year later, and she raised me, was a wonderful stepmother, and I didn't know she wasn't my real mother till I was 12 years old.
So where did you go to school?
Century and Wabash High School. Then I went to Depauw University for 1 year, and then the crash came, and I worked a year at Talbot's garage for Harold Talbot, and then I went to International Business College and graduated there. And just when I graduated, my dad had a stroke. So he was running a cigar store, and I stepped in and ran it for him, but didn't like that kind of work. So I was there a year, and then I went into the First National Bank.
What did you do at First National?
Well, I started as in the transit department, but was a teller within a short time and handled notes.
You were a teller and handled notes, and then what did you do?
Well, then through Mr. Honeywell and Marvel Walrod, they offered a job as a cost accountant at the Honeywell plant as production was starting to pick up, and they had to put in some sort of a cost system, which they had never really had before because they were relatively new at that time.
How active was Mr. Honeywell in the bank when you were at the bank? How active was he in the business?
He was only interested in seeing that it was growing, and he, of course, attended the board meetings, and he kept a special fund there to loan people that didn't qualify under loans. As far as banking principles, they could loan out of his special fund because he didn't want anybody to go destitute if they were nice character and so forth, but yet couldn't qualify for a loan, didn't have collateral and so forth. They could loan out of his fund.
This wouldn't qualify under today's banking laws, I'm afraid.
Couldn't be done.
These are small personal loans?
Just small loans, maybe $50 or $25 or, I suppose it would go up to $100. I don't remember anything like that. But $100 per cent was quite a lot of money. But surprisingly, I can remember people borrowing $15 or $20 at that time that would carry them through maybe 2 or 3 weeks because the groceries were only $5 maybe for a week.
Did he act on these, or did you just
no, they reported the district committee. He didn't act on them. He just left that up to security at the bank.
This was all his personal money then?
That was his personal money in a special fund.
Someone else has alluded to the fact that when you worked at the bank, that you were not allowed to borrow money from the bank itself, and they had arrangements for DPR, and that he would loan you money either through a Minnesota bank or something. Are you familiar with anything of that nature?
No, I don't remember that. That's true because in a national bank you can't borrow there.
The employees can't borrow?
No. That's two of the other employees we loan here now.
Yeah.
From here.
From your
accountant.
Yeah. On the bank, you were relatively young and weren't married then.
Yes, I was married in 32.
was there ever a time when you needed money then, when you were that age and starting out in married life?
I guess not, because I never had to borrow from there.
Yeah.
I can't even remember borrowing until about 1937 when I bought my first new car.
Mm-hmm.
And then I borrowed at the bank, but at that time I was over at Honeywell.
Yeah.
So I don't remember about the bank, whether or not you could borrow there at that time or not. I'm sure you couldn't because it was National Bank, and I expect that law was in there.
Yeah. We're going to go back a little ways here. We just passed over your dad and his business and everything like that. And give me a little background. Were your grandparents still living when you were a child? And
No.
Neither side, your mother's or your father's?
Well, my mother's mother lived till 1923, but she lived in Chicago, so I really didn't know her very well.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was from Blackford County, the city, and he had a brother and a sister, and the farm was left to the three of them. My uncle bought them out, and then turned around and left it to me, which I still own, and only 120 acres.
Mm-hmm. When did your father die then? What year?
1937.
Did he always run the business then, up until 30?
Well, he had a cigar store then, and he bought in 1908, and he ran that up until he died, and then I sold it to Pudlin, the Red Cross. What's
her name is Nelda. Her husband?
No, the one that lives right next to McAllen's office.
Yeah, that's Margaret.
Margaret Lumley.
Yeah. Oh, that's her husband.
Her husband bought my dad's cigar store.
Yeah. And where was the cigar store located?
Well, it was located right across from the bank on the corner where there's a loan company now.
Yeah, to the corner of Market and Wabash Street on your southeast corner.
Right, southeast corner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He never owned the building then?
No, the Christman family owned the building.
Yeah. Do you remember, you worked there for a year, who else worked in the cigar store back in those days?
Well, John Hutchins worked for me, and especially after I had left and went over to the bank, he ran it as long as my dad lived. Mm-hmm. And John married one of the Lynn girls, and he's now in Minneapolis. Speedway. I can't think who else may have worked there at that time.
Good times worked there one time?
No, not for George. He always had clothing.
Yeah.
Sold suits and making something.
Was the business was quite a bit different in those days than it is now?
I don't know. There's too much difference. I suppose we have a bigger volume now, but the kids, the one thing that they did then, I don't think they do now, you had a lot of high school boys that came in after high school to play pool and would loaf around there, and I don't believe the kids do that much anymore because Dad ran a very clean place. He didn't permit gambling, though they had dice there, but you would take just double or nothing. That was all his money. And it was more or less like a bowling alley is now. I think probably bowling has replaced pool. Although pool, I think, is coming back in the home. It doesn't seem to be in the pool hall anymore.
Did he make a pretty good living at that time?
Adequate, yeah. He made enough that he had the first, or the third 1915 Dodge. And it was L.A. Baker was the agent. I think he was in business where you are. Yeah. And Dad liked Mr. Baker, and so he bought the third Dodge. I think Frank Williams had the first one, as I remember. So my dad never learned to drive. He always had to have a driver.
Who did that fall to, the driver?
Well, he hired different ones that worked at the store to drive us on Sunday. That's when the car only went out on Sunday. And like we'd go to Hartford City, we'd hire a driver to go over there, see his relatives. And
what year would that have been?
15, 16, right after he bought the car. And I learned to drive, my stepsister rather, learned to drive. So she could drive around town, but they didn't allow her to drive out of town. And then in 1923, I was 13, and I learned to drive. And I had to go down to Boulder. That was before you had licenses. But I had to get a permit because I was under 16. And had to drive him around and got a permit to drive.
What would a trip to Hartford City with the Shroyers, what would that be like on a Sunday?
Starting early in the morning, about 7 or 8 o'clock, and getting over there perhaps there was a dirt road. And the car only went about 25 miles an hour. So that's a good 40 miles. So it took us probably 2.5 hours to get over there.
Roads were pretty rough?
In places. Washburn, I can remember Washburn. Bum, 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 bum.
Can you remember ever making the trip without any mechanical failures? Or?
No, we never had any trouble.
Flat tires.
Except rain, maybe, or something like that. And have to put the side curtains up first. There was no curtain.
And did you drive at night in those days?
Not any more than maybe if you left Hartford City a little too late in the evening. It might be dusk when you got home, but not night. We jacked the car up in the wintertime and put it up on blocks, and the garage came up and took the battery out, and we didn't drive it in the wintertime.
What did you do for transportation?
You walked to the streetcar, we lived on the streetcar track in Urban.
Where was the family home on that street?
Well, it was a rental. My father bought 250 Manchester Avenue in 1911. And that is where Mayor Booth sold it to Mayor Timmons later, after my folks died. And that's where I went to school and grew up there. And we kept it in the family until my father died.
Was there a grocery store out there close by, or did your family shopping?
Oh, we bought everything from George Lumley's grocery on the side hill, as I remember. There was Augie Rump and family had a grocery up across from the old Century Schoolhouse. That you'd go up and get something you forgot, like a loaf of bread. But
primarily most of the groceries were purchased down at Lumley's on the side hill.
They had delivery service, you see.
That's when Mr. Bailey came into play on the delivery service, I imagine.
I expect he probably did. I didn't remember about groceries. We used to have the grocery boys. I can remember the snow staying on longer, and they delivered groceries to bobsled. And we'd hitch our sleds on behind. They'd allow us to, and pull the horses, and we'd ride up and down Manchester Avenue.
Did you know Mr. Honeywell by any chance at this time?
No, I just knew he lived there as I walked down Wabash Street, but I didn't know him then.
This was after he moved off of Maine there?
Yes, he lived, that was after they moved in Maine. They moved up on Wabash Street then to Redwater Old Home, which is now the, what's the lawyer's name here?
I think Bob Magley.
Magley, that's right.
You went to high school, Robert.
Yes.
What year did you go to?
1928.
1928. And who were some of the members of the class that you still see and know that are around and so forth? Who was the treasurer in the class?
Harriet Temple was president of the Association.
Is that unusual for a girl to be president of the class in those days?
Yes, I think it was, rather, but Harriet was a very well-liked person, very easygoing, very attractive girl. And somebody put her name up, and of course everybody liked her because she was one of those that never, I don't think she had an enemy. And So she was very popular. And let's see, Wanda Smyers King, I think, was secretary of the class. But I think who all, I've lost contact with all high school kids of those days.
Does the class ever have a reunion?
No. Harriet, I tried to get Harriet to go on one in about 54 or 5. And Harriet apparently wasn't feeling very well, and she didn't enthuse to it. And then a little later, she wanted, about the time I moved out here, she wanted to go on one. And for some reason or another, I had lost interest in it. And so as a result, we never have done anything about it. Another one I can remember in the class was Bob Albert's wife.
Catherine.
Yes, Catherine was in that class, and she and I had talked about trying to get the group together. I don't know whether she was an officer or not, but she was a very nice gal, too.
Did you look on your high school days, as you look back now, were they warm, happy days?
Oh, very.
Were they?
Sure.
And the principal was Darnell?
Darnell.
Mr. Darnell.
And we liked him.
And your teachers, anyone you remember?
Oh, Beth Bearer, and was the best teacher anybody could have had. She, when you first started with her, you thought she was cross, but she was a teacher that really was able to teach you. And, of course, there was Stella Moore, and Ruth Jones, and Tewksbury. Those were all really outstanding teachers, but Beth Bearer in my book was the best.
That's funny, I had Phil asked you yesterday, he came to Wabash to replace Stella Moore.
Yeah, that's right, I'd forgotten that.
Yeah, he came to take her job in the high school system. Yeah, we did. Nothing outstanding in the couple of years that you worked with the First National Bank and the reorganization, if you can recall. Do you recall any disgruntled?
Yes, we had a lot of unhappy people.
I understand it wasn't the best time for bankers in those days.
Well, this is the person who's deceased now, but Bert Allen E. King there was hired by Mr. Honeywell on the recommendation, I believe, of Willard Huff from Minneapolis. Bert was a bank examiner in Minnesota, and Mr. Honeywell personally had him come down and look over the bank, and Bert recommended that the bank be closed. He didn't see that it would pay out. He was proven wrong later. And they did have some South American bonds or something that turned out to be all right, but that was primarily the thing. And much as I personally liked Bert, I know that his business, I don't know how to say it exactly, he was much too strict, as bank examiners tend to be sometimes. They aren't very lenient. They don't value character and ability of persons. They go too much on the dollar collateral. So Mr. Honeywell used his political influence on the recommendation of Bert to have the bank closed. Of course, there was a moratorium, they all closed, but he had this to be sure it was closed and to be reorganized. I don't blame Mr. Honeywell for this. He did it on the advice of Bert Allen. And of course, at that time, bank stockholders had to pay double. If they owned stock, they were liable for the same amount again in case of failure, which they called that bank a failure by doing that. and several people were hurt. Not maybe badly hurt, but nevertheless, during that time to lose your money and have to pay in again was something nobody wanted to do, and wouldn't want to do today either, which they don't have to now. But I think that in later life, Mr. Honeywell and I talked. He was very disillusioned by Bert Allen's advice, and he realized that wouldn't have had to take place because the bank did pay out and paid a dividend to the not to the stockholders, but to the people that had money there.
After the moratorium, to get the banks rolling again, or to get it going again, was there any procedure that they had to go through with?
The reorganization, completely.
And
that's when they reorganized and Mr. Honeywell became president. Prior to that, Charlie Haas, who's my wife's dear uncle, was president, but I don't remember exactly when he died, and I don't know who was president when the bank was closed.
Was it First National Bank then, or
it was the Wabash National Bank?
The Wabash National. I've been told, and maybe you can bring me up to date on this, that when the bank closed during the moratorium to reorganize the bank, they had to get the stockholders to invest a certain amount of their stock back in the bank. Is that true? Or?
Well, they were liable for double indemnity. In other words, if you had $500 worth of stock, you had to put up another $500 in that bank when it was closed. Yes, that's what it was.
Could you use your old stock as collateral for this new 500?
No. You lost that, and you lost that, what you originally had in there, plus you were liable for that much more. That was the way the old banking law was.
I could see that with several unhappy people. When you started then, was there a great mistrust toward the First National or toward the people that were in it? Or?
Oh, yes. Yeah. There was a lot of people at that time moved perhaps to the Fountain Bank at that time, and to the Land Bank, and did their banking even Peru.
Yeah, it was not an easy task to make.
No, because you didn't bank by mail like you do now. They had to drive in the 30s, that took money and gas, but there were several business houses, and I kind of think some of them yet do not bank with the First National. Probably. You shouldn't hold things like that. We have the same thing here at this bank. I mean, bankers tend to make enemies, so you can't help it. And people were disillusioned or disappointed by some of the people that used to be in the bank here won't come in here on account of that, regardless of who's running it in the bank.
Did Mr. Honeywell, to your knowledge, study any of the financial policies for the now reorganized First National Bank at that time?
I doubt if he kept them, but whatever Bert Allen did, Mr. Honeywell was aware. He was advised, and Mr. Honeywell's business ability, he knew what was going on, but as far as operating the bank, I think it was purely Bert, because he's the one that then started charges, for one thing, which nobody had ever had before that time. He was the one that started charging for a bank. He charged so much for a check and so much for a deposit. And, of course, the clerks had to do all that figuring, service charges, and that was the beginning of that.
How did this tie in with the First National Bank and the Wabash Plain dealers with BPI and this? Were you familiar with that?
Well, sure, but BPI was not with the Wabash Plain dealer until after Don Nixon died.
Until after Don died.
And then he was hired purely as a consultant to Mrs. Honeywell while I was still at the bank. And he was a consultant to her to begin with. Then he, at that time, brought Ralph Stripping down when he was going to spend more time with the newspaper business. And it ended up then that Ralph Stripping got into the newspaper business and went to they moved to Peru.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember all why or anything like that. I think
But you were gone out of the bank by then.
But yeah, I was over at Honeywell by that time, and George Peterson also was brought in by Bert Allen from to the bank.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Well, he was there. I would say he was there 3 or 4 years working in the bank.
You talked about Marvel Wallrag inducing you to go to work for Honeywell. How did that go?
Well, I had lived in the neighborhood where Marvel lived there on Manchester, and she lived around on Noble Street. And I always knew her. She's perhaps 10, 12 years older than I. Mm-hmm. But they usually walked to work, and she walked by the house, and I got to know her and always liked her. Mm-hmm. So when I was working in the bank, and they found out from Minneapolis that they had to have set up a cost system, she asked me, I was waiting on her at the bank, and she just said one day, would you be interested in coming over and setting up a cost system? Well, I'd never set one up, but I had cost accounting, but because you're also bravado, then you think you can do anything, which finally did, but I'm sure it wasn't the easiest thing in my life, but we got a cost system set up. Which I went to Minneapolis and found out what they wanted and came back and we set up one of the first standard cost systems. Mm-hmm. Probably in the community at that time, because standard costs were new. That was a new sort of a system, and we took variances and so forth. Much more elaborate now, but at that time it was a very simple system.
Who was the plant manager in that business?
Shivers.
Paul Shivers?
Paul Shivers. Mm-hmm.
And then you would have been head of the entire accounting?
Well, I was it.
You were the whole thing.
Mickey McDaniel was the purchasing agent, and he and I shared an office, and he knew the parts, and he knew the ropes and system, and more or less taught me what a circulator was and the things that they were making, because I hadn't any knowledge of what they were producing. Mm-hmm. Like they were making hair elements for humidity controls and things. Those were just starting right then, you see. And so he would brief me on that, and they didn't even have parts lists or anything like that. They'd have a drawing they worked from, and that was it, And so he would help me, gave me a great deal of assistance in the manufacturing end of it. But I had to set up the accounting end of it.
What year would that have been?
36, as I remember, was the year I started there.
And what kind of money then would a young cost accountant make?
I was making $75 a month at the bank, and I went over there at $85 a month. And those people that were making $100 a month sounded tremendous. Mm-hmm. But you could live then.
Was Honeywell, when you finally got the system set up and everything, did you find out that it was profitable organization? I mean, after running all these years without these accounting procedures.
Yeah, I think old companies just if they ended up with so much cash at the end of the year, and they could, of course, they had a system of balance sheets. They had listed their assets and so forth, and you took inventory and determined, set up your new figures and wrote off if there were shortages. Mm-hmm. But yes, I think they found out and that they had to set up a standard cost system overall, because they were beginning to grow. As I remember, the total employees of all Honeywell plants when I went in 36 was only something like 3,000 people. Mm-hmm. Wabash had maybe 100. Mm-hmm. And Minneapolis was just a small plant. And then, of course, now, I don't know, they must be
20,000.
Oh, I think they're more than that. They're hundreds of thousands now.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, yeah. They were, yes, they're quite large now because they have many diversified interests.
Did you see Mr. Honeywell then after you went down to the plant?
Yes, he had an office right across the hall from us. And he'd come in, usually every morning, when he'd go down the hall, he'd stop in and say, how are things, Not every morning, sometimes he'd be in a hurry, but he was in every day.
Did he ever call for a report, familiarize himself with the cost procedures?
No, no detail like that. He just would call you in once in a while and ask how things going, and maybe he'd see something as he walked through. He always walked through the plant, and he'd see something he'd inquire about what they're doing here, what they're doing there, and they would brief him on things like that, But as far as the cost end of it, no, he wasn't had no part of it. He would come in and chat more than be interested in anything particular of the plant. That's he apparently was thinking about that time about the gymnasium. And he was an admirer of Cecil Mills. See, 39 when he made the announcement he was going to build the foundation. His interest then was the country club too. He entertained. I'd go out there and I remember him be on the gate for him when he entertained one week of special parties when they had Governor Shroyer and a lot of notable people up there when he first built his lodge in the country.
And you had to go and be the overseer of the people that got in?
He'd ask me to come out and give me the list of who's going to come in, and we check them out, check the cards out. And they had to have, they didn't have an invitation. I suppose it was engraved. That didn't impress me that much to them. But we had, some of them drove up with their chauffeurs and everything, and they had to show us their identification to allow them in the gate. They used the North Road at that time. Came into the North Gate, wound down to the woods. And
beautiful. I've seen the photograph.
I would, on those days of those parties, I'd go out there, leave the plant, go out there about 11 o'clock, and check them in.
When he started building the foundation, then you were still in the accounting end of it, right?
Oh, yes, I set up the original books for the foundation at that time, the original counting books, Yeah.
Did this throw your accounting procedures off when he would be calling men like Alonzo Molindoy, Buck Martin, and Gene Ramsted, and that to be working hours?
Well, the Honeywell company, of course, paid in effect for those men because, and for me, so that's no, because he'd design on a piece of paper how he'd want a light fixture made, and in fact, the Honeywell plant made those light fixtures. Now, we tried to keep track, and we'd have the boys turn in so many hours, and we would build a Honeywell foundation and transfer money over from the account when they did specific things.
Right.
And the air conditioning he put in originally down there he wanted a water air conditioning for some reason. Because that was one novel thing. We had air conditioning in the Honeywell plant when I went there in 1936. No other office in Wabash had air conditioning. It was supposedly experimental to test controls. And it was wonderful.
When you did transfer money from you set up the books for the foundation, you transferred money from the foundation back to the plant.
Right.
I'm sure that there must have been hours that must have been your classifying procedures.
Oh, a lot of it we missed, but the boys, if they were working on some big projects, they'd come up and say, well, I worked 10 hours this week, so much, and then we'd pull that out of the company and debit the foundation.
Was there anything unusual when you set up the foundation for it?
Well, it was very simple then. Because he kept adding more money as he could tax-wise each year, and I'm sure it's tremendous now, but at that time, he would donate so many shares of Honeywell stock. I mean, he'd sell it and have it sold by the broker, and the broker would send it to me to send it to Marvel, but I set it up on the books. He actually handled the cash and the checks because he was his secretary, but I handled the accounting end of it and gave him the reports on it, on the original. I'd like to remember how much money it was, and I don't. I that he first plunked into. He knew something like $15,000-$20,000, but I could be
just to get it started.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's more than that.
Oh, I mean, just to get it started, yeah. Oh, my. And that time you had a Mr. Webb that was doing all his work for him. He later died. He started the foundation there.
Were you working a lot of hours after that stage?
No.
You could handle all this during the course of the day?
Yeah. There were only, as I said, about 95 or 100 employees. So it wasn't hard to, I had to do the payroll for them and figure the payroll.
That was all done by hand in those days.
Oh, sure. Didn't even have a calculator at first, so I got one when I went to Minneapolis and told them I needed a calculator because you had to do everything by little things you adding machines. They didn't have any calculator.
Of course, you didn't have the deductions and the withholdings and
not the 37 when Social Security started. Then you had to start your deductions. Of course, then you had a bookkeeping machine. And those very big old one that battle track.
How did your career progress in the time? You set the system and...
yes, and then of course the company grew and the war came along and we got up to 1,200 employees. And we had 3 shifts there at that time. And of course, by that time, the cost system had become much more elaborate. And we were doing mostly war work from 40, I suppose 42 or 3, I don't know, up to about 46. And in the meantime, Mose Woods became plant manager. Shivers,
44, I
I suspect. That was about right. Shivers went to Minneapolis at that time and went into the engineering department. We had Charlie Buckland down here. He was no longer with Honeywell. He was secretary of the company at that time. And he came in right after Shivers, and then Mose West was made plant manager.
And were Mose and you the same age?
Mose a year older, but we'd gone through high school together, and he and his wife and Helen and I had always taken our vacations together, like on trips even before. Well, Helen and I were married, but they weren't. We'd take trips, and then like they went to Niagara Falls and Smoky Mountains and up in Michigan.
During this career in Honeywell now, was any problems financially, cash flow, anything relative to the Wabash plant?
Yeah, we tried to keep our cash at that time. We tried to keep a maximum of $25,000. We ran kind of what we call a min-max, as I remember. We'd transfer back and forth from Minneapolis, and I would figure the payroll and then call Minneapolis and tell them how much the payroll was going to be. And they would, at first they used to send checks. And then afterwards it got so they transferred it just from bank to bank. Then we figured out how much we paid our own bills, I think, on the 25th of the month, and we always had them. We would roughen them and tell them how much we're going to spend. So we always tried to keep about $25,000 in our bank account, and they would transfer into our account.
And the material that you were producing here in the Wabash plant, then you would do your billing?
We invoiced, but we sent the accounting copy to Minneapolis to be posted. How did you feel about that? That was quiet there.
How about your relationship with Mr. Honeywell now? It's transferring, and I understand that you have sort of more active participation in his life. And
well, yes, we got sort of like Christmas. I don't know why I started with Christmas Eve, but we've always been invited up to Honeywell on Christmas Eve and to him to say hello and be good. And then I I usually took my vacations in wintertime in Florida, and whenever we'd be down there, we would insist that we'd come over and be with them for the day at their house and take us out to dinner and to all these clubs. And sometimes I'd even go with him for just he and I. And we'd go to one club and another. He likes to go around to the club. And we'd go in and have a cocktail at one, go on and have a cocktail at another, and then eat lunch at another one. And he enjoyed getting around there. He was getting to a place where he didn't drive much anymore. But he liked to get out. And of course they had their help there too that could drive him, but he said that isn't quite the same.
This was in the first Mississippi Revolution?
No, this is the second.
This is after 1942.
Yeah, that's right. I just barely knew the first Mississippi. I know this big two in that movie. Because she really didn't spend any time on them all that after they made their money. They did the lower too. When she would come north, when I was first at Honeywell, they would be at the house maybe a week or two, and then they'd go right on up and looking at the Wabash Cottage at some time. So that was one of the first fancy ventures. They had a rascally room in there that was so beautifully lighted, and we had the rooms decorated like Moon over Miami, and we had all the walls painted, and the lights would change so the moon would come up, and it was a very effective room.
Had you been there and Harvey?
I've been to invited there, not as a group party, just as maybe a couple friends. They would just invite us that way, but not as one of the big social parties that they'd have, where they'd have the balls like Clemency and people like that. No, I wasn't in that class.
When you go to Miami, when you do Miami, you see Mr. Honeywell, and obviously he was enjoying life.
Very much. They had a beautiful home, and I expect the living room was probably 90 feet long. I would guess, I don't know, it was tremendous, and the most beautiful courtyard. The house was built in a complete U with a wall at the back, and the courtyard was gorgeous. Gardenias and flowers, and they did kind of entertaining and beyond, it was silent. And had this beautiful home, and we did have his yacht, the Olivet, but the government, as I remember, took that thing and swore out for him, and he had to sell it to him. And he had another house, but I don't remember what happened to that exactly. Now, Marble Walrus would probably tell you if you ever interviewed her. She would know all about those things. You see, too, Miss Honeywell at one time was the Committee of 100 in Miami. In other words, he was the president of the Committee of 100. And that's the 100 select men that built Miami Beach, so to speak, and developed it and set the rules and regulations. And so when he was down there, he had a secretary down there. I don't recall her name. I knew her very well. But he even brought her up here for something he was doing, I remember. And he loved that kind of a life. To be, he enjoyed that Committee 100. He spent most of his time on when he was in that, because Palm Beach was always recognized millionaire playhouse, and this group of men were determined. I think they were considered maybe the Nauvoo Hotels in those days. And they were going to make Miami Beach that equal to Palm Beach, and I think that that's the impression I got anyway. It never came out that that's what they were trying to do, but I'm sure that most of the people who pictures just were millionaires, but they weren't in the original Palm Beach stuff. Did
Mr. Honeywell, at this stage in his life, had he pretty well phased himself out of the arts part of the business.
Oh, yeah, completely. Completely.
And,
he began to slip a little bit up there. Oh, he would kind of forget. Then I see the floor going out of me. That's first item that we were sitting there. They wanted me to go with him down. And Helen was down there, and I was going down in a few days. And so I looked after him, and I said, I'm not going to tell what.
well, you can correct the type copy. Yeah, well, it's in the trailer. Well, anyhow, he was out of the business and so forth by this time. Looking back now, do you remember any unusual experiences that you had with Mr. Honeywell or your business or social or other than
He loved to drink. And we'd go to a club, the four of us. Mr. Honeywell. I remember he liked to dance with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And they would just dance all over the place. And he was close to 80 years old then.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd nearly wear me out because we'd dance it too. But the thing that I always remember about when you go into a club with them down there, one of the private clubs, they would see them coming and they'd strike up back home again in Indiana or Wabash or Blues or something. I mean, it was very flattering to go in with them. You couldn't help it. We were younger and very impressed. And they were always so nice to us that we thoroughly enjoyed it and had a wonderful time. And wouldn't have gotten into those places except by their invitation, of course. So we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, really, then you were more, I wouldn't say social, but not business.
No, it was more on a friendly
basis.
Yeah, one funny thing that happened one night. In the country club, we had invited Mr. and Mrs. Honeywell to dinner at the country club, and went out there not knowing that it was the party of race day that Noah had. So after having several drinks at our house, we then lived in Bonbrook. We went out there and got out there around 7, and we couldn't get served. And they said, oh, it'd be an hour. Well, we would have enough that we all four knew that we had to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So I suggested going to a restaurant downtown, but that was, I could tell Mrs. Honeywell, we don't go downtown, and she didn't say that, but I could tell that was not the place to go. So Helen says, well, we'll come back to our house, and I'll just have to scramble eggs. So we took them back to our house, and we sat in the kitchen, and Helen got so flustered she forgot to even put a tablecloth on the kitchen table, and we sat and ate scrambled eggs and cottage cheese and maybe some bacon or whatever was in there, you know. And they said that was one of the best times they ever had, because it was so informal and just fun out of it, you know, because they just didn't get to do that. I know Helen and I took a trip with Mrs. Honeywell and Joe Stuffy about 2 years ago, and we went up in Canada to one of the hotels up there. And Gene said, I ran the car, and Gene said, you know, I'd like to have a picnic tomorrow. And I said, a picnic? She says, yes, you know, so she says, I can't go out on a picnic in Wabash. But she says, I'll have the hotel fix box lunches. And let's just take a drive and find a place to eat. And we ate in the park up there. And she said, that is something I never get to do down there.
Yeah, I can appreciate that.
I hadn't thought about it till you mentioned it.
Yeah. Then, after Mr. Honeywell got sick and then in the hospital and then we mentioned the fact that you were part of the official family of the Talbot.
Yeah. But that heavy casket with 8 of us and taking it down the steps to our foundation, Jim Eddinghouse and Buck Martin and I can't think, Jim Davis was too. I can't think of it, probably Phil Magner and Nicky McDaniel. As I remember the group, and Buck had had a heart attack, and Jim Davis wasn't too well, and that left the load for Jim and me, because the others, we were probably the youngest. But I never carried such a heavy casket in my lap. It was down those steps, and it was really tremendous.
Looking back, what would you have to say, Mr. Honeywell's outstanding attributes here?
He was always interested in other people and wanting to know about them, but he didn't want them to know that he had inquired about them. He was always interested to know whether they really were getting along or needed any aid or help. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure he gave assistance in a lot of ways that people didn't know about, because he liked people, and he liked gaiety in life. He liked flowers. He loved flowers, and he had a great eye for architecture. I don't know if you ever noticed this out at the country club down in the basement. There used to be a furnace room, and the bricks are all. You go around the corner, and he didn't want any corner. He didn't want it to look like a corner. He made that terribly difficult to make that, because those bricks had to be buffed off somehow, so there was no sharp corner. He wanted it to meld. He had a great eye for architecture, and probably could have been an architect had he studied for it when he was young. He had an artistic eye. I would say his interest in building was the one thing that he probably loved more than anything. Even when he began to slip mentally, he liked to slip away and go up and watch them when they were building the Eastwood School building at that time. They'd find him up there. He would slip out of the house. He knew they were building. He loved to watch the building. The building going on.
I was just watching that tape there. Well, I think he was pretty well covered, Mr. Honeywell, and the Honeywell plant, I assume, ran out. You got the cost system set up, and the cash flow was regulated.
Yes, that all worked out.
Then you went back after the war, the relative peacetime production, and you had union problems.
When I went there, they didn't have a union. The factory didn't have vacations, even at that time. Of course, our first union was a local union, and they didn't affiliate with the national union, even with the Minneapolis union for many years. But they derived the same benefits without affiliation, because whatever they set up there, we set up in Wabash, excepting, I don't think maybe the grade was quite like, if they got $1.50 an hour, we probably didn't pay $1.25 or something like that, but still, if they reached benefits of vacations and started the pensions and all that, they got those benefits without affiliating with the union until finally, of course, more help, younger help got in, and then, of course, all became unionized.
Was that a particularly difficult time for management?
Yeah, very, very. You had to be so careful at that time of what you would say. I guess you still have to be, but I'm no longer in that.
You would be close to Mose.
Oh, yes, and I had to be very careful what you had to say outside, because and what you'd say to the employees, because it could be carried. I was then office manager as well as accountant, and we didn't have an office union, but you didn't know which one of those girls maybe would go tough something that you might inadvertently say, so you had to be pretty much on that.
Do you think that that was a wise move affiliating with the International Union at that time?
You're putting me on the spot. I don't believe in unions. I believe in local unions. I think that a union within the company is a necessary evil, but I think that the unions have gotten so tremendous and so big that I think the little man doesn't truly benefit too greatly from the union. I think he would do better if they had their own union, their own capable officers in their group, and they wouldn't have to pay as much money out, and there wouldn't be as much crookedness as I'm sure is going on in between politics and so forth.
Well, that may be true. I'm going to turn this tape in. I'm going to make this the end of part 1, and we'll check it out here. Part 2, Charlie Shroyer, April the 11th, 1972. We're just talking about unions, and I think we've exhausted what you want to say about the union at this time, anyhow.
Oh, sure. I know that they're good unions, too.
Now we come on to a situation that happened here, as everyone calls it, the Freeport gang. Depending on which side of the fence you were sitting on. And first of all, what led to the move and so forth? And, as you remember it from your own.
Well, I don't think I would really dare say what I think. Because Moses' departure, too personal.
Yeah. Well, I knew that you and Mose were...
Not on my part, but too personal on his part. And of course he's dead now, so it would involve somebody else too.
Yeah.
And
well, let me ask some questions that I get from the others when we talk about this. Did you feel that, first of all, everything was running smoothly at the time before this happened? You were into the post-war era and so forth.
No, not particularly. I could see what was not right too.
Yeah.
But Mose, by that time, had more or less, well, frankly, he didn't really associate too much with anybody at the plant anymore, as far as the people that we had. Even when Mose moved out from Bondbrook, I think I was only on him. I was only in Union's house, maybe once, after he moved out there.
Why?
I don't know. He completely changed.
Do you think the pressure of the business and the age possibly had something to do with that?
A certain amount of ego had something to do with it. I'm sorry to say, but I'm afraid a little bit of it may have gone to his head. But he didn't run around with anybody. That was the thing we couldn't any of us figure out. Not only just the fact that we ran with them, but they just didn't run with anybody. He and Mary Alice maybe go play a little golf, and they go in the club for dinner and go home.
What is the situation with you and Mose and Jim Ebbinghaus and Howard Williams were all basically the same. Howard was a little younger than you were. All basically the same age, all Wabash products, all known each other in school and family and everything else, and then all of a sudden you have this big change, and it's almost incomprehensible to think what happened there.
It really was, and I think it was Moses' own undoing that he was transferred down to Leroy.
Was he having trouble with his hearing prior to this, or had he always had trouble with his hearing?
Oh, he just began to have trouble with his hearing. So I'd almost forgotten that till you mentioned that. I forgot he was beginning to have trouble with his hearing.
That, as you look back, might have been a contributing factor, you know. You don't think?
I don't know. I think we could say it that after Mr. Honeywell's death, the Easterners who took over Honeywell more or less started operating the Wabash plant, and they started making changes in the Wabash plant personnel. Sometimes they sent their own man down from one department, and eventually another one would come down from another department, and you could readily see that the original Honeywell group was being pushed either aside or out, and I happened to be one of them that was pushed out.
Not aside, huh?
No. It turned out happily. At the time, of course, I was very hurt for having been there 29 years to be pushed out. But this happens in many companies, and I still attribute it to Harbor Jail running this company.
You know, this is rather strange because I think that this had a rather unusual effect on the community. When you and Howard Williams and some of the others, and Jim Ebbinghaus being demoted in the shuffle and so forth.
Right. Well, if they had kept me, no doubt there'd have been a big demotion. Which,
I think that the community felt at that time that possibly they were going to close the factory. Did you ever have that feeling?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have been a bit surprised
if they closed the factory.
Yeah. I think Mr. Honeywell's wish that the Honeywell company always be there since he started may have been the only reason that they kept it there. But they made so many foolish transfers of product lines. They'd, for instance, the clocks, I remember, one of the last things I did when I was there, they transferred to Minneapolis. And I understood within a year later, after it was in Minneapolis, it was transferred down to Chicago factory. Those are expensive things to do because there's a lot of wasted time in packaging and learning from new employees to move product lines. Mm-hmm. And I understand that's been going on almost ever since I left. Product lines are in and out, and different ones come in, and they take something someplace else. And to me, that's no way to run a ball game. If you're going to really make money, I'm sure the Wabash plant hasn't made any money.
Yeah. How did you finally get the word that Charlie Shroyer was no longer going to be part of the Honeywell circle here in Wabash?
So one morning, I believe it was Dryer, that services would be terminated, and they'd get, I think, maybe 4 months pay.
Yeah. Was this bowled out of the blue to you, or?
Yes, of course it was. Business had dropped off quite a lot, and had transferred from production into production control, and then production control was getting littler and littler, and there weren't very many employees there, and lines were going out, but I didn't expect to be personally let out. That was quite a shock.
Yeah, that'd be a tremendous blow to your pride and
of course,
and your ability.
Right. Mm-hmm.
How about Jim Ebbinghaus? I did Jim on the tape, you know, and poor Jim got shuffled around. And
well, yeah, he ended up more or less a clerk, I think. I don't know. I see Jim once in a while, but
he's retired.
Yeah, I know he's retired, but I run into him maybe in Wabash and going in and out of the store or something, you know. And Jim, as far as I knew, took it very well. He seemed to. He didn't seem to mind. He had reached that stage where they just pushed him over. I think the same thing happened to Mully in the last few years he was there. Mm-hmm. Mully used to be the shop foreman, and I don't know what he ended up before he retired. That's Alonzo Mullendorf.
Of course, I think that the nature of the business
that changed tremendously, but they brought in all these college-educated, which is the trend of many big companies. I've talked to a lot of friends that, for instance, Fort Wayne and International Harvester, a similar thing takes place in many of these. Mm-hmm. They look at a college degree. I didn't graduate. I did from International College, but I didn't have a master's or something like that. And that seems to be the trend in these college-oriented companies where you either have to have a degree in or your master's or your doctorate or something like that.
Or you're out in the cold.
Or you're out in the cold eventually, but they don't seem to take into account experience is equal to much more than some of them. Now, true, some of them can maybe, say, education only makes them able to think, maybe faster and better, but the one that's been there and knows the workings can certainly do the factory much more good. But you can't tell some people that. And maybe they find it out after they're 50, 60 years old.
Yeah. Did you felt then there was a time when the plant would no longer be here? And
I wouldn't have been surprised because this was about 1964. I thought it was really going downhill when Insler pulled out and left Shroyer there. I didn't think anybody seemed to know what was going on anyplace. So it looked to me like, yeah, thing may close. And of course, I had ego enough to think that if it closed, I'd been there long enough, I'd be taken to Minneapolis or sent to Florida or something, you know. Found out those things don't bounce that way.
they don't happen.
No.
Let's go around and we're going back and just sit on a few spots. I think all the employees have left it down there. I hope they haven't locked us in. Yeah.
They probably locked us in. They better lock us in.
What happened in the, let's say you were 5, what happened?
I thought, well, I guess maybe I'll just go to Florida and see if I can find a job down there. That was my first thought. This was in April, I believe.
Of what year?
65.
65 years. 55 years old.
Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I didn't have enough money to retire completely, but I believe maybe I'd go down there. And we were going to the country club, some sort of a probably dinner dance or something, and we were at Hank Walter's for cocktails before, and Bud Temple was there and said, Charlie, I bank out of the Fountain Bank, and Mr. Marshall, their cashier, just died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're looking for somebody. Well, I didn't, other than when I worked at the bank, I remembered a little bit out to the Fountain Bank. I didn't really know anything about it. I also was interested at that time in buying, I was like hardware store, I thought I did anyway, and I heard that there was one for sale in Marion. So I went over on a Saturday morning and to inquire about that. I looked at it, didn't think too much of it, and on the way back, I decided to stop in here at the bank, so I came in here and asked them who did the hiring, and they told me that Mr. Shroyer was the president where he lived. I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm.
And went up to his house and talked to him for about a half an hour and told him that I could give him some recommendations like Wilberforce, Leroy Carpenter, and Harold Talbot, and Ralph Sherping. And so he said they'd already hired another man, but they weren't sure that he was going to come. He was, I believe, from Swayze or something, and he was a little reluctant to come over. He wasn't sure he'd get along with the board. And so he says, I'll have to let you know whether or not. So I think he called Monday or Tuesday and said that I told him how much I wanted, and he said, you can have the job. When can you start? Well, I at first said I wanted to take a little vacation, and I told him, I said, well, in a couple of weeks I'll come over and talk to you. And then I decided, well, I'd probably not enjoy my vacation because I hadn't done banking for so many years that I'd be too nervous, and I might as well just start right away. So I just came over and started right away. Yeah. At more money than I was making at Honeywell.
Has this been, I just looking at you and talking to you, I would imagine it's been a tremendously rewarding experience.
Oh, I'm sorry that I didn't do this 10 years before because, well, perhaps we weren't having all that trouble 10 years before Honeywell, but we'd have skirmishes off and on, and I have found out that this is much more enjoyable. I like to work with the public, and of course you don't in a factory. In an office in a factory. You're back. Of course, you work with employees, but not with the public. I know the public is aggravating sometimes, but it also is rewarding too for the many nice things that you can do in helping people out. And sometimes the loan is a little risky, but you're making something available to people, and it's the people over here are wonderful, and I've never been happier than back when I was a young kid. A lot of responsibility, but not pressurized in a small town like this. And another thing, your work is diversified. You do everything in a small bank, from wait on people to post the books if I have to in the ledgers or something like that. If you're in a big bank, you're specialized and you do only one thing, and that to me is boring. That's fun sometimes the way accounting gets. But this, you have accounting and you have finance and you have investments, and I love the investment part of it. It's fun to try to figure out which investments you can make is the best rate of interest. Maybe only a fraction of a point. But if you've got $1 million and a fraction of a point, maybe Fed funds is paying 7.2 and United States bills is only paying 6.9 or something like that. It's only maybe 3/10 of a point. But on a volume like that, it's amazing how much more that makes.
Yes, it's good. Has the bank grown? I assume it has since you've been here.
I started at $1 million, and when I started, the bank was $1.7 million, and we're now over $5 million. The board has been wonderful to work with. I don't know why this other fellow really turned it down. I guess one time one or two members on the board were a little reluctant to progress. I never found it so. Anything I suggested, I said to them, well, now either you go up or you go down. And they had no savings accounts. They just had checking. They had no certificates of deposit. And I said, we've either got to join the people and go with them, or people are just going to walk away and the bank's just going to dwindle to nothing. And so the one person who they always said was the one that held back just went right along with everything. And I have heard that Mr. Marshall tried to put in savings and certificates, but somehow this one fellow kept dragging his feet and never let him do it. So we got him in by the end of the first year, and that's, of course, and then we transferred undivided profits into surplus, which made us able to loan more. They could only loan up to about $7,500. It was their biggest loan that they could make, and now we've changed that to $22,500. And probably we'll have to make another change and put some more of our undivided profits in surplus so we can loan more.
Good. How about, that's quite a compliment to go from 1.7 to $5 million.
Yeah,
in a relatively short period of time as the bank goes.
Yeah, I've been here now 8 years. Just 8 years next month, May.
I think we're about ready to wind everything up. And do you have any impressions or reflections either on anything that we've talked about, Mr. Honeywell or Mrs. Honeywell or Wabash or your employment? Or how about the Ku Klux Klan? This is a question I always throw everybody.
I never knew anything about the Ku Klux Klan. I can remember as a kid watching a parade, and that's all I ever knew about the Ku Klux Klan. And
through the Depression, you always had a job, really?
Yeah, always had a job.
Very fortunate. If you didn't have a job, it wasn't too funny.
Yes, that's for sure. I worked at Talbot's garage in high school days, and after school, and worked in the office and ran the gas pumps out in front. They had gas pumps out in front in those days, and one summer, maybe I guess the year I went from Depauw, Harold Talbot offered. He knew I was having financial trouble, And Harold Talbot offered to send me to school. Said I could pay him back later. And I didn't take him up on that because I was a rector scholar at Depauw, and I'd had my tuition paid down there. But I didn't want to be obligated to anybody. So I decided then to go to International Business College, and I came home every Friday night and worked at Talbot's on Saturday all day. And he overpaid me, but enough that I could eat in Fort Wayne and pay my board and room along with a little help from my folks. But not very little from them because Harold overpaid me enough that I could stay in school, and he really was a very good friend.
Great. Well, I think that this is probably the most interesting interview I've had. Former Honeywell employees or just plain old good citizens from Wabash County. And Charlie, I want to thank you today for this. And,
well, thank you, George. I've enjoyed doing it. I was reluctant to do it, but I said I feel like I'm among the older, elderly people, which I don't attribute to being. I try to stay young.
I would tell you that you might let any of the relatives or something know that these will be corrected and typed and edited by you and then placed in the library for the future generations of historians and scholars wanting to know about this particular part of Senator Shroyer's life. Good.
That's most interesting, and I thank you for asking me to do it. I'm very flattered.
Good. And this is George Dingell.